Welcome, welcome, welcome. My name's Ernest Russell, and we want to thank you guys for coming back today for another episode of the Freedman Collective.
What's up, Ernest? Thank you for having us today, man. It's a nice day outside. It's freezing cold in Detroit.
Oh yeah.
Cold in the D.
Hey, you got that video? I should upload that video.
So yeah, welcome to the show today, guys. We're hoping to get a good dialogue going. We do have the conference dial open today. So if you guys want to call in, definitely be sure to check out that. As I was saying earlier, my name is Ernest Russell, and I'm out here in Lansing, Michigan, just here to give you guys another good dialogue. So with that being said, I'll kick it off to the other guys.
So you know me, I'm Darvell, here out in the suburbs of Detroit, trying to make sure everybody's good. ADOS movement, just been out here for a couple years now, so we're going to have a great show today.
Hey, y'all, it's Gerard Ben Lamont, you know what I'm saying, sitting out here on the east side of Detroit, getting, loving it right now, man. Can't wait to get into this show. Really want to, we got some meat on the bone to talk about today. Looking forward to it.
Hey, this is Stedman. I just want to tell everybody to like, share, and subscribe. Share. We tend not to say that, but we want you to share this. Like the information we're putting out. If you enjoy our content, if you want us to continue, like, share, and subscribe. It helps us grow our channel. Helps us get the word out.
That's very true. Yeah, definitely make sure you like, share, subscribe. And we're on Facebook Live right now, as well as on YouTube. So leave the comments. We'll see the comments. And of course, as you see at the bottom of the screen, we got the call-in line. We're going to go through a couple different topics, give opportunity for people to call in, and we'll give you a little bit more instruction on that later. So thank you to the gentlemen for introducing themselves. Today's discussion, the topic, the headline, right? The title that you've seen was a little spicy, right? You can't out-trap being black, and that's true. I think that what we see a lot of right now, even during the pandemic, is a lot of people trying to make do in an economy, in a nation, in a system. A lot of black people trying to make do and trying to come up in an economy, a nation, a system that has systemically oppressed us and has architected ways to keep us down. And I think a lot of the damage that we have to overcome right now was already set up well before a lot of the people who are watching was born, right? So what we're dealing with is an accrued disadvantage. You're dealing with the legacy that comes behind you, because if the legacy isn't bringing to you a wealth deposit, if it's not forwarding you a starting bank account, right, of hand-me-down inheritance, like many people are getting, and there's no house to come down with it. There is no pension fund or 401k or whatever coming from the grandparents or the parents. You're not getting a bunch of free cars or a free down payment on your house, something like that. That's kind of the essence of what it looks like to be American, because Americans have been allowed to accrue wealth, even with any of the minority groups that have come into the country after the country opened up in the 60s for mass immigration, mainly. We've seen a lot of groups come in, be able to build their wealth and to rise up to some of the highest levels in the country. You didn't have to be here all the way back in the 20s to be on top in 2020, right? So a lot of things that we're seeing right now, unfortunately, are things that make sense on paper. Like if we think about them, like, okay, if I get a greater degree, like go and get a master's or a PhD, I'm going to get paid more. I'm going to be respected more. But we got entire state attorneys being pulled over in Florida, black as everything else, getting pulled over. You got people being put in jail just because of being black. We got police. There was a report from Ferguson that I just seen on one of my favorite shows recently, a report from Ferguson where it turned out that the police were pulling over black people and not using their laser or radar guns, and then claiming that they were speeding, officer's judgment, right? And you have to fight back against things like that. But if you don't have the money, the liquid funds right away to deal with that, you're going to have an issue. Banking black has been another one that's come up recently. We're going to get into what all this means in the greater scheme of things. Banking black was a thing we've tried repeatedly. There's great books out there on it and how banking black did not produce the wealth that we should have had all along. as well as like rental properties. Right now, that's a big thing, is people are being told to go out and invest in properties and, you know, accrue rental properties. There's no shade on being in the marketplace of real estate. But mainly people are getting into it just to find a way to make money so that they can move their familial wealth position up, because they're at zero, because we're Black, we're ADOS, we're descendants of American slavery, which insisted on being at zero because of the system that we've been accrued in. And I think that everyone's putting formidable efforts forward. And guys, you tell me if you think differently. You may know people who have been doing these things. You might be doing them yourselves, but the collective uplift we need for our community isn't held in just everybody going out and buying properties, because at the end of the day, for our community, when we talk about equity, which is what we really want, we want equity, which is we want to be paid, we want our pension, we want our coffers, the level of money we have wealth-wise to reflect the amount of contribution we've made to society in this country. And we've made more contribution than any other racial or ethnic group you can devise. Outside of the formidable GDP of the entire nation overall, Black people were worth more than a lot of things, all the way going back historically. And still today, we're setting cultural trends that other people just take and run with. So I think that there's a lot owed. It's been calculated that there's a lot owed. And when you deal with that, when you start to talk about how do we flip, how do we pay back, how do we get this right economically for the Black community, specifically descendants of American slavery, you'll find that the racial wealth gap will not just be closed, it will actually flip. And you will find that many Black people will hold more wealth than your average Black white family or any other type of family, because we put in the work in our legacy, right?
Hey, but Darvell, I mean, but at the same time, man, what about the cats that say, you know what, man, you can't inherit a job. You know what I'm saying? I need to get out there and make the ends for myself. I don't need government. White people ain't gonna get me. Why we gonna wait around for no reparations? White people ain't never gonna give us. I mean, shit, they haven't done good by us now. What makes you think they're gonna give us a check? I mean, so what? I mean, what to that, man? That's a good pushback in my opinion.
Yeah, I get it. But you know what? One of the things I say, and I think everybody who's achieved something in their life, especially things that they didn't think they could do, and everything that's been achieved for our community and anyone historically, in terms of a collective achievement, even in this nation, we always were looking at something that we didn't think we could do at one point in time. And then somebody started to lead the group and say, no, we can do this. You just need to follow me. And they started to build hope. They started to build belief. They started to give an undergirding, a structure, a lens, a framework to people that help them understand what's possible. And what we say in our spaces, that's called political education. That's called politics 101. That's called Black civics. And when you start to understand that, you start to get a sense of political imagination. And that's what made coronavirus stimulus packages so possible so quickly, right? It's political imagination. It's understanding how does this system really work. And people who are incessantly being contrarian against any type of economic stimulus specific for Black people, or specifically reparations, or anything that's going to correct our wealth position to where it should be, those people typically don't have the education or the understanding of the system in the sense of how it could work. And they also tend, if they understand it to some degree, they tend to want to default to what currently is the status quo, because the status quo is easier to deal with because you don't have to do anything. It's called being lazy. Because if you go against the system to try to get reparations, it's just like your MLK now. You have a target on your head, do you not?
I mean, you do. And then I was going to say, just to even jump in there, Gerard, like to those people, you can't really inherit a job, but you can inherit savings. And so when our people have to understand that a lot of stuff comes with like financial literacy, as well as trying to change the norm. And so for us, a lot of our cultural norms have become perverse to the point where we live in kind of like a reverse society. So everything that kind of white America does, Black America does something that's wholly different or separate from the actual game plan that'll get you ahead in the country. So, and what do I mean by that? I mean, like, so we all know that education could lead to higher incomes, but how many of us are willing to attain that education, or even to take it a step further, how many of us can afford that education, because we're starting out at a point where it's almost impossible to play the game. I mean, it's hard to go to school if you can't afford it, or your parents can't help you afford it. And it's even harder to do that if you have records or things like that affect many of our ADOS family members across the country at early ages. So it's like you're limiting yourself in a sort of sense that keeps you in this hamster wheel, and it keeps our culture as a collective, down. So I would say, in order for us to kind of get out of that mindset, we got to change how we're thinking about certain things, and that would include reparations or certain set culture. I would say set best practices as far as how to succeed in America. But of course, with the title of this show is called "You Can't Out-Trap Being Black," because of course, for our people, there is a system in place, and for some of us, we're able to escape that system. But when we look back at all the people we have to save, we realize how daunting of a task it is. So. That's just my tidbit.
Yeah, no, I'll just throw at that, the idea that, financial literacy education, knowing what to do with your money, how to best utilize it, how to invest it and things like that is something that we all try to continue to dole out in the community. I'm a little frustrated with that because we're trying to make do with 2 pennies when we should have had $100, right? Mm-hmm. And I think that what happens is people like to do the financial literacy and those type of teaching and education maneuvers as they're not trying to be divergence, but they are divergence, because at the end of the day, you telling people this is the priority takes them away from the political education they need to be investing in and to get the money so they can invest, right? Like, I'm not knocking people who've been able to make it with those type of, processes and tools and things. But at the end of the day, the truth is, it's not that we're throwing that money away. It's 2 things. 1, we've been stuck on the bottom. And 2, because we've been stuck on the bottom for so long, it's kind of like we've been put in a jar with the lid screwed on it with a small air hole on top. And then that jar was put into a pot of boiling water. So if you it's kind of like crabs in a barrel, but if you put this jar in the boiling water, whatever's in it, it gets hot. It starts to act dysfunctional. It starts to degrade. And so we start doing things just to get by, just to feel good, just to make the best of the life we have. So now we're spending money on things that we don't need. Now we're out here doing things that create more babies out of wedlock. Now we're out here having more increased rates of violence and criminal activity and things like that over the national average. But it's all born out of being compressed into that jar. And we need to crack that jar. A few of us know that jar is there, and we need to crack that jar. We need to bust out of this, and we need to get everybody out of here, because to expect the Black community to outperform national averages inside of a jar is asking for way too much, especially when we have so much due to us. I'm not, I hear what you're saying, but we go back to like the report on the racial wealth gaps, and especially the 10 myths about closing the racial wealth gap. I want us to keep focused on that Black civics, right?
Yeah, I feel you, man. The way I look at it when people talk about, hey, we gotta, I'm a hustle, I'm a grind, you know what I'm saying? They're not saying screw it. They're not doing the school route. They're not doing, the politics route. They're going to focus on, hey, I'm trying to get my bread, whether that be by legal means or illegal means, right? And the way I think of it is like monopoly, right? You know what I'm saying? Like, what's happened to Black people is that when it was time for us to go and get our $200, each time, we just kept going to jail. We just kept going to jail. We just, like, what I'm saying? That was slavery and Jim Crow. We just kept going to jail. Do not pay, you know what I'm saying? Do not pass, go straight to jail.
We went to jail.
Right, exactly. You know what I'm saying? And so then we finally came out. You know what I mean? Now everybody done bought up all the blocks, all the properties, you know what I'm saying? They done turned their little houses into hotels and so on and so forth. Now you finally get your $200. Now we supposed to be like, okay, go, Jay-Z said go buy the block. What you mean, man? You know what I'm saying? I got 200. The block is now like 1,800. You know what I'm saying? I can't buy the block no more. You know what I mean? It's kind of, like literally that's what it means when you think about it, man.
What was you saying,
Steph? You was about to jump in on that, baby?
It's a documentary. It's a documentary on YouTube. I think it's called Park Avenue or something like that. It discusses kind of what you're talking about. Park Avenue goes all the way up to the Bronx. And the Park Avenue that's in the Bronx is like one of the poorest congressional districts in the country. The Park Avenue that's in Manhattan is one of the richest. And so what they do, speaking of the monopoly thing, they do this. I can't remember. He was like at UCLA or UC Berkeley. He did a doctor did this experiment where he gave he had two people play Monopoly. He gave one group or one person, he gave half the amount of money they were supposed to get, and the other group double the money they were supposed to get. And the person he gave half the money, when they went past go, they didn't get to collect their money. It was all this other stuff. And the person who did get to collect, either they collected double or they just collected the 200. And what he studied is like he looked at the behavior of the individuals who were playing the game, and he said even though the people they were picked arbitrarily, so you were given a double money versus the other one who was given less money, the people who had more money behaved as though they deserved to win, like they had done something to deserve it, even though it was arbitrary. And that like kind of hits at human nature. And then what you're talking about to a wider degree of all people, right? All people who are working class, low income, whatever. And especially like you're saying, when you're looking at black people or ADOS people, where we have legitimately been locked out of the situation. You know what I'm saying? If you play Monopoly and you don't get to collect $200 when you cross, and you start out with half the money, you can't play. You can't buy any of the stuff. You never get a chance. You'll never get a chance to get invested in the game.
Yeah, you can play, but you living by everybody else's rules, you know? That's the concept, yeah.
It was crazy. So, because you could see like the player too, like, hey, you owe me this much money. He was like, man, I don't have any more money left. You can't buy property. You can't buy property. You're not getting the $200, so you're not even able to participate in the game on the basic level. And that's what you're talking about.
You pay rent. You can't even pay the rent because when you land on one of the pieces, Park Avenue or Broadway or whatever, you know what I'm saying? You got to pay the rent, and that's basically what's happening to a lot of people right now. Where due to COVID, you know what I'm saying? But even prior to COVID, you know what I mean? People can't pay the rent. If you don't own, you rent. You know what I'm saying? It's only two games in the housing market. Is either you rent or you own. And if you don't own, you rent. And if you can't pay, you get evicted and you become homeless. And that's why 50% of all homeless people are black people, and it's more specifically black men. You know what I mean? And who has been put more under the dirt, in this society, you know what I'm saying, has been black males, because look at mass incarceration. That's literally go to jail. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah,
go to jail. You know what
we've been looking at 200 years of not pass and go, and then when we get to the 60s, our people finally get a fair shot, or the government try to persuade us into believing we had its fair shot. So I think like as we go forward with our show, and even as we go forward with just pushing the ADOS movement, one thing we have to reiterate to our people is it may seem as if we have a fair start today, but in reality, because of the starts that were set yesterday and 10 yesterdays before that, we're behind. So it's like we're trying to play a game of catch up, and everybody else is already outraced you. You're trying to get in, but they have those triathlons, how people run and then they cycle, and then they also do canoeing. We're basically trying to get on a bike, but the white people already didn't canoe past us. So you know what I'm saying?
And I want to get that, Ernest, because that's important, because a lot of us, and I'm included, born into, I guess you would call it, black middle class situation. Yeah. We weren't poor, but we had enough. And we got through. My mother was able to kind of launch me into school. I got through college, got a bachelor's degree, became an engineer, done all this stuff and whatnot. So, I have a good income. I feel like I'm secure. I take care of my business. So I feel like I have options, and I do have options. But the key thing I think people miss is that as a black person in this country, specifically American descendant of slavery, you are actually supposed to have more options than you even thinking of right now. And that's the problem, because what happens is when COVID hits, you are actually one of the first people to go down, but you shouldn't even go down, because you should have had more before you were even born. And no one realized, they're not gravitating toward that, because what happens with the other folks, they have those fallback, options. They have mom, pop, grandpa, they got that pension, they got the house, they got all these things where assets are either liquid or they're frozen, but you can unfreeze them or tap into them somehow, And that's something that we don't have, because what happens is our grandma or our mother, she doesn't have enough life insurance because they was ripping her off to begin with. And then when she passes away, the life insurance just barely covers the funeral, and then you can't keep the house.
Mm-hmm. And
that's if they have life insurance, bro. Yeah, everybody's looking at each other talking about how we gonna bury Big Mom. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah. Like so, even like to what you saying, Gerard. Like a lot of things. I guess for a lot of ADOS, and we see this all the time. Black people across the U.S. Every time there is a death, in most cases, everyone's trying to scrap together that $5,000 to take care of the family member who is behind or who doesn't have this wealth to even be buried. You know what I'm saying? And so that's just a reminder, you know, of what we're dealing with. But at the same time, like if we're talking about our grandparents, I know my grandparents, you know, they migrated from the South to Chicago, and that's kind of how we got up north. But the reason why they migrated from the South was because of the job situation, because of the, you know, discrimination and harassment they dealt with down there. So they said they came north because they were thinking things were going to be better. But when they got up there, they realized things are slightly the same, but they get a little bit more freedoms. And so really their conditions never truly changed. You know what I'm saying? They just changed whips in a sense. And that's the reality that we're living in. And I would say to even add on to that, like the changing of the whips, when you move up north, you lose that access to a rural space, or, you know what I'm saying, just having the ability to have land. And now you're dealing with urban neighborhood and, you know, mass population and, you know what I'm saying, all of the things that come with city life and those things. Is trying to earn a wage to take care or pay rent, you know what I'm saying, or put food on the table. And that's a lot of, I would say that probably has played a pivotal role in my family's history as far as, you know, coming from the South, going to the North, trying to find a way out. And some of us, we've made it. I have family members who have successful careers. And at the same time, even me, like to your point, Darville, like I was raised in a, now that I know better, I know I was raised in a family that was below the poverty line. But at the same time, even with that being said, we could talk about this later in the show when we cover, like, you know, bootstrapperism and all of that good stuff. But I was able to make it out, but I got extremely lucky. You know, I got a full ride scholarship. Even with a full ride scholarship, I had to rely heavily on my uncle who was in the Air Force, who had to send me $100 or $200 in school to get by for, you know, 2 or 6 weeks. But I had friends and folks who went to school in, you know, different circumstances, different situations where they had this capital or they had access because their parents were established, but majority of us weren't. And so you end up dealing with a lot of consequences that come with that poverty. And so most of us might not make it.
You're right. And so we got to pivot, though, because I know we got a couple other things to get through. So, I mean, with all that being said, like we say, you know, like I was starting out with the, you know, banking black, rental properties, all these different methods of hustling or trapping, however you like to look at it, in order to come up as individuals or for your nuclear family. Those things may be successful on an individual basis or even a nuclear basis, but really you should be vastly more successful than what you're seeing now. And I think that you can't really do any of those things with a long-term success. That's why we have so many businesses that fail without support of black policies, right? And black faces in high places is typically what we think of when we think that we're going to get the black policies or the policies that are for blacks. And we find that that's not always the case, right, Gerard? Black faces in high places don't necessarily mean black gains.
You muted.
Yeah, sorry about that. Yeah, that is a major problem. You know, is that why people are so disillusioned with the political process is because, you know, hey, we've been voting since at least the 60s, right? Mm-hmm. You know, and it seems that our physical and social situation has gotten even worse, you know, and it's really as a result of our black politicians being more wedded to the party system than to actual black interests. I can have a few articles where I can show and actually detail and kind of go into some specific examples, you know, in reference to, you know, what actually happened and what went on. Darville, my computer is having some problems, man. So I'm gonna need you to actually share the articles because I'm slow.
Yep, but the first one is the Benson, right? I'm gonna pull that up. Or what is the first one? Which one you want me to show?
Our first one will be Black politicians don't equal better lives. What we've been talking about.
Yeah. All right. Let's get that popping for the people. Yeah. All right. Let's share our screen, huh? All right. application window. We're gonna share and tab now. Sharing.
Okay, so this was done in the Mike Webb blog publication. Why more black elected official hasn't necessarily meant better lives for black Americans. If you scroll down, let me see here. Where was it at? So anyway, so yeah, so it says it may seem like a sin repudiation of actions of the city, but the bombing took place where good was mayor. So what they're referring to is they start off with saying, if you know about in fact, the documentary is about to come out on HBO. Move was a very controversial black independence, group back in the 80s, and in 1985, they were, I believe, because they were such I guess the neighbors in the neighborhood was a nuisance or what have you, because they were like, farming. And this goes back to what you were talking about, Ernest, right? You know what I'm saying? In Philadelphia, West Philadelphia, this group, they want to go back to more traditional, like, lifestyles, but they were in an urban environment. So they had goats and all types of different things going on. They were living, communally or what have you, but they were causing a lot of the residents in the neighborhood had issues with what was going on. So they were complaining. So eventually it got down to where, the police were harassing the members of this organization. And somehow there was actual incident with the police, and it was actually like a standoff, an armed standoff between the police and the Move organization and this this townhouse. And these are like row houses, like super close to each other. Like if you all are familiar with Hamtramck, like even we're talking about even closer than that as far as size of the parcels of land and the houses. So anyways, they were having this ongoing, basically standoff and battle with the police. The police came up with the idea, we're going to drop a incendiary fire munition on the house from a helicopter. They dropped the bomb. Literally, they dropped the bomb.
4 pounds of C4.
Yeah, maybe so. Yep, and they dropped it, and obviously the structure caught on fire. But they decided that they weren't going. The fire department wasn't going to put it out. They knew there was men, women, and children in this home, and they just let it burn. Ultimately, they burned 2 whole blocks down, and all of this happened during a black mayor's administration. When you're the mayor of a city, your police department, fire, all these things are part of your administration. Usually, you appoint the police chief, generally speaking. Sometimes they have to be elected, but either or, they're still the mayor and the police, fire department. They're all they're all part of the executive office. And this happened. So it goes to show you now, either the mayor had no influence, or he wasn't willing to go against the police department. One of the two things, either or, it was a bad thing. But here was a case where you had a black mayor and he wasn't able to do anything politically. And that's why people get disillusioned. It's like, what's the point? We thought by electing black people that we would have somebody advocating for us and protecting us in the, in the wheels of power. But, it does nothing. And then later on, the mayor at the time, his name was Mayor Wilson Good. He later wrote in an article about stating that, he thought that was wrong and that the city should formally apologize. However many years later this happened in 1985. I was like, 4 or 5 at that time. You know what I'm saying? So, again, it just really goes to show that if you don't hold your black politicians to some sort of litmus test or an agenda, then, what do they owe you? There's no different from white politicians. To get more granular and talking about this, we're going to switch over and go to something that happened in our own neighborhood, which was during a black administration. Actually started in a black administration, the Dave Bing administration. He was in from between 2009 and 2013. And this was the start of the illegal tax overassessment which led to a tax foreclosures for many Detroiters, over a third, where they lost their homes. Go ahead, Darvell, you fire up that video.
Okay, yeah, I got the actual video for that. Hold on. Let's pop over to that. All right. I don't need to play the Uber tube. All right, let's play that video.
From 2011 to 2015, the Wayne County Treasurer foreclosed upon approximately 1 in 4 Detroit properties for non-payment of property taxes. Once the properties were foreclosed, many were left vacant, many were vandalized, and stripped of everything of value. These derelict properties lowered property values and caused anyone who could get out to flee. The property tax foreclosure crisis in Detroit has wiped out entire neighborhoods of Detroit's most vulnerable residents. Poor and working class black families have borne the brunt of this crisis, and it should not have happened. According to the Michigan Constitution, no property should be assessed at more than 50% of its market value. It turns out the city government systematically inflated the property tax assessments of homes in Detroit beyond this legal limit. In fact, between 2009 and 2015, 55 to 85% of Detroit properties were unconstitutionally assessed each year. This led to illegally inflated taxes on those properties. Why? Because in 2008, home values in Detroit plummeted as a result of the Great Recession. But instead of reducing property tax assessments to match the lower value of homes, the government robotically copied the previous rates, making only minor adjustments. It was no surprise that residents weren't able to pay. And here's the kicker. Many families were not supposed to be paying property taxes in the first place because they qualify for the Michigan poverty tax exemption. But Detroit didn't publicize this and made the application process so difficult that it was nearly impossible to complete. So when we look at the decimation that unconstitutional property tax assessments have left behind, who is to blame? Working and poor people who are struggling to provide a home for their families? Or the government, who systematically and illegally inflated the assessed values of homes to increase their property tax revenue, then seized homes from families when they could not afford to pay? Join our fight to end unconstitutional tax foreclosures in Detroit.
Well, yeah, man. Again, another clear example of black people getting, the rough end of the stick, and there not being any type of recompense for it. The recompense that we get is usually always a day late and $1 short. And by this measure, Darvell, if you could bring up the rejection of Douglas plan article.
Sure. Yep. Yeah, and that's Darvell's pulling that up. I was going to say, keep in mind that 2009 to 2015, we had a black president, or supposedly a black president. So
yeah, more important, we had
the Justice Department. Yeah.
we had a black mayor. His name was Dave Bean. And the tax assessor office is an office that's under his jurisdiction, as he being the lead executive of the city. Okay, and I tried my best to look up to see who the tax assessor is, and who it was during his administration. I couldn't find it. The current tax assessor, he is his name is there, but you can't find a photo of the current one. So. But this actually this started in Bean's administration, and it continued under Mayor Mike Duggan. Mayor Mike Duggan was elected in 2013, 14. I believe he started in 14, and he's been our mayor since then. And what he wanted to do was, and so the people called for, people lost their homes because of that. They were overtaxed, as the video stated, and they lost their homes because of that. They couldn't pay the overtaxes, Like I said, in many cases, many of them qualified to not have any taxes because Detroit's a predominantly poverty-stricken city. But because of that, and this goes right back to reparations and our lack of the wealth gap, right? You know what I mean? The reason, what was the incentive behind Detroit doing what they did was because those home values go down. Then now, you know, then the coffers, right? Obviously, the tax coffers are going to go down likewise, right? You know what I'm saying? And because there's so many of us, you know, in this city, 85% in the city. Also, we have the highest. I think we have the highest rate of poverty in a major city in the U.S. And that's not by coincidence. You know what I'm saying? This is as a result of our wealth condition, which is a result of Jim Crow and slavery. You just can never escape it. As much as we would like to forget about it, we really would. Obviously, all of us are tired of talking about it, but we living with it, you know, every day, day in, day out. And this is why this exposes to these things that happen all the time to us, and we don't have a lot of options or ability to fight against it because we don't have the wealth. Anyway, so Duggan was saying to give overtax owners land and bank account discounts, first dibs at the city programs. If you want to go further down, Darvell.
Yep.
So ultimately, the mayor's proposal review of free press does not include a refund, which some residents and activists have been pushed for to make up for the overtaxation. But Duggan's staff said the plan is most fiscally responsible way to recognize and correct past mistakes made by the city's assessor, which includes selling participants discounted Detroit land bank homes that have been prepared for auction and side lots. Now you understand. The average home on the Detroit land bank, right, you know, is going for $1,000, somewhere about $1,000 or whatever, depending on how bad of a state it is. It may go, you know, in the auction may go up higher, right? You know, but a lot of these homes need a significant amount of repair, significant amount. And in fact, that's why in one of our videos, I believe we talked about proposal N. We were against proposal N. Right, because of all of the money that's required. Because 9 times out of 10, poor to working class Detroiters are not going to be able to get the refund, be able to get the monies to secure and get these homes right in the condition that they need to be. So we acknowledge the wrong. We did the wrong. We do so much to find a policy. Okay, so going down. Scroll, keep on scrolling down. I think the main issue. So there was people who fought back from it. That group that made that video, they went down to City Hall and stated that you know, that this wasn't going to work ultimately because one, he capped it at the overtaxation that happened on Bing's administration, not his. Right. One of the mayor's proposal, anyone who owned a home in the city and lived in it as a primary residence between 2010 and 2013 would be eligible, which is estimated about 130,000 homeowners. There's not even 100,000 homes in the land bank. I believe a total is 22,000. You know, and of those, not all of them are even eligible, you know, that aren't even worth even saving. They're going to bulldoze like 6 to 8 of them. All right. The main point, if you can find in the article, the main point that I wanted to look at, Detroiters were overtaxed by a total of $600 million. The overall money that they were going to allocate to this was $6 million. So I don't even think that's a tenth. I think what 60 million would be a tenth of 600 million. Yeah. So the only money they were going to allocate towards this fund, because they're claiming that that due to COVID, right, they're losing out money from the casinos because they're being closed and so on and so forth, was $6 million. It's somewhere in the article, man.
I see. Detroit News investigation found the city overtaxed homeowners by at least $600 million between 2010 and 2016. Of 173,000 Detroit homes reviewed, more than 92% were overassessed between 10 and 16 and overtaxed by an average of $3,800.
Now, if this is in a predominantly black city, you should be scared if you're in a city that's not predominantly black. You know what I'm saying?
There's another paragraph here, and I think this is more to your point.
This is right here. The Detroit City Council must approve the plan, which is expected to cost $6 million.
1%. I mean, that sounds about right. I mean, that's what we're dealing with in history. So literally the government has made about, trillions of mistakes when it comes to our well-being or development. And then every time it's time to fix it, they give us 1% of the total damage done. we gotta make means with it. So
man.
And I mean that's really like neoliberalism. I mean, when you look at we're talking about, tokenism or symbolism or whatever. When you see elected officials looking at Joe Biden's cabinet, he got all these women or quote unquote minority groups. I think he's trying to appoint a black Secretary of Defense who was a general. Like that's neoliberalism. This idea that we can just like
put a black face in a high
democratize place. Oppression. You know what I'm saying? Or democratize like oppressiveness. So like everything's better. Kamala Harris vice president, Obama was president. Like all this stuff. It doesn't. And so the question we got to get down to the bottom of when you're looking at these situations is like, what is the difference in me having Barack Obama as president, who didn't do nothing for, anybody, but specifically black people. Like black people disproportionately voted to put him in office, and that's as true for every Democratic candidate that's been president since Nixon. Not Nixon, Kennedy. But like, what's the difference in having you here and having Trump? Or what's the difference in having you here and having Bush? Or what's the difference in having Nancy Pelosi in charge versus Kevin McCarthy? Or, what's the difference in Chuck Schumer and Lindsey Graham? Like, y'all are the same.
See, and now I'm going to play devil's advocate for the folks who are sitting in the back who think that there's a marked difference between these individuals, in terms of comparing them and contrasting them on the surface. And that's the problem. A lot of these people are looking at the surface. And again, going back to when I started out when we talk about having a proper political education, black civics, you realize one thing is taking the precedent over everything, and that's the agenda. And what you'll find is that these people's agendas never are there for black people in the way they need to be with the specificity. And that's how they end up being the same. How they go about, putting colored face or white face or a name or, here or there minority, it doesn't matter because it's still missing the agenda, right?
Mm-hmm. And to this segment's point, we're talking about black faces and high spaces. So thinking about the last 100 years, we've had how many black faces and particularly high places? I would say Obama's probably as high as we got when they say black for president. And of course, he isn't even ADOS, but he's definitely a black race, so they say. And so with that being the concept, it's like we can look back, maybe I would say 80 years ago, we would probably had similar representation in Congress as we have. Maybe not today, because I would say there's probably more black people in Congress today overall. But if we're looking like after Reconstruction until the mid-1920s, there were probably the same number of black politicians in a couple different localities, state levels, and then federal levels. And then if you look at all of the changes that they tried to make for the better, or even if the federal government was just like not having to make any changes at all, if you look at these last 100 years, you'll see that we haven't progressed. And that is despite black faces in high places. So, the math is pretty simple.
Right. So we gotta keep the bus moving. We only got about 15 minutes left. And I think, Gerard, did you want me to bring up your next piece, or you want to hit me?
Man, we can go ahead and keep it moving for the sake of, it's more depressing anyway. Another example of a black politician that's still currently in office that sold us out.
And to our viewers, the last thing I'll say, Darvell, is you got to think. We just mentioned how Detroit overassessed the property taxes. Or I guess the government of Detroit overassessed the property taxes, right? Or property values. What does that do to the education? Because I know property taxes feed into a lot of the school systems. And so if we're talking about neighborhoods being depleted and, ran over or ran down, or 92% of these homes about to be, bulldozed or removed, what does that do to the education in those communities, specifically for those black children? Because that's how the taxes are raised. For the schools,
right? It makes it worse, and then it makes it worse. And then when you opened up, they had school choice that happened in the early 2000s or what have you, then everyone, you know, most black kids are going to charter schools anyway, or they're going to suburban neighborhood schools, right? So you know, so then with that student goes the money, the funding. You know what I'm saying? So DPS loses that student. Then you know, then you have the takeover by the state. It just never gets any better, dude. You know what I'm saying?
It won't get any better until we start to understand. Like, it won't get any better until people really take this seriously and understand that black faces in high places is not doing the work. Trying to trap it on your own, even with your entire nuclear family, or hustling on your own, even with all your friends and cousins, is not doing the work. And also, what's not doing the work is just standing around saying, I'm just going to do me and keep it pushing. A lot of people fall into those three categories, and then they just stay out the way and nobody does the work. And then the few people who are trying to do the work don't have the wind at their back because everybody else want to stay safe and stay home.
And another thing too, we got to, you know, to that whole talk about, you know, staying in your lane, or, you know, I'm going to try to keep my head down or whatever, and just grind or what have you. The thing is, yeah, you could do that, and you could have, like I said, individual success, or, you know, maybe, like I said, just in your outside circle, family, familiar or family success, your immediate family. But the thing is that you live in communities, you know what I mean? And we all know, you know, hey, look, I live in the hood, and one of the big things is, what do we all know? If you've got a TV or something like that, you better bring it in the dark. Cut up the TV box, you know what I'm saying? Because you don't want to get robbed, somebody going through your house. You know what I'm saying? You don't invite people over to your house because it's like, you know that you don't know, because somebody, you know, might be envious. Oh, yo, they got this TV in there, that blah, 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 so on and so forth. So you got that situation. Then, well, okay, well, you say, well, I'm going to move out to the suburbs. You know, hey, I can't take it no more. These Negroes, they've been breaking into my house. And I've heard a lot of people say that. The reason why they moved to Southfield, the reason why they moved to Hazel Park or whatever out to the outlying suburbs was like, yo, my house is getting broken into too much, right? Then you move out there, you know what I'm saying? Then what ends up happening? Everybody, you know what I'm saying? You get a bunch of black people move out there. Guess what? The white people move out. They move even further away. So now you're still around a bunch of black people. You know what I mean? Property values go down. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah. Story of Southfield, man.
Just to jump in, Gerard, that's an actual great segue into our next segment. So people need to understand the criticality of our wealth position, or exactly where we stand. So even when we live in the hood, you know what I'm saying? Like, I would say we've made ends meet with what we had. And so a lot of families, you know, they have what they have, and those who, like you said, Gerard, who may have more than the have-nots, they actually have to deal with another set of social conditions, which is tied to poverty, which is people who are poor wanting the things that, you know, someone who else is probably just in the same position, they want what you got. And even if you move to the suburbs, or even if you live in the hood, our wealth position really doesn't change, because that's a part of that illusion that we have, or I guess it's a part of the illusion that the system presents to us. And so when we start to talk about wealth, one thing I really want to stress this show is making sure our audience understand what negative wealth is. And so literally, to keep it as simple as possible, debt are things that are owed, so anything that you owe, and then asset is anything that you can own. Black people in America have more debt than we have assets, so we owe more money than the things that we even own. So to give that an example, if we're renting in a house, we're paying about $800 to maybe $1,600 every month. That's just renting a house. So in order to rent that house, you need to supplement income that comes from your job, or whatever side gigs you're doing. Now, that bill alone is for your house. You have to think about car insurance, health insurance, all of these other things that have costs that you would be paying. And then on top of that, if you decide that, I want to get a nice car, so you get something off the lot, now you're actually in debt. So it's like you may have enough money or income to pay for the things you need, but when you start getting things that you want, that's when we start realizing the situation, the negative wealth, which is just having more debt than we have assets. And so for me personally, even with a full ride at school, all 4 years free, I had to take on debt from my school just by borrowing loans, because, you know, the money I was getting from my family just isn't enough to really supplement a college lifestyle. And so
right.
with that being the case, I guess I have negative wealth because at the end of the day, I have more loans than I have assets. No one in my family has a home that we could, if a debt collector came to collect, the remainder of my student loans, which it doesn't work that way. But let's just say if I forfeited or, defaulted on my loans, if they came to garnish that money, I wouldn't have any assets for them to take. So at the end of the day, I could bankrupt myself just from being in a bad position as far as not having a savings. And that's tied to, of course, like we said earlier in the show, 200 years of not pass and go. So you know what I'm saying? So we think we're playing the game. Really in the 60s, we've just been allowed to play the game, but now we're playing catch up. And when we look at it from a generational standpoint, having the money or the wealth to provide for our children is something that's lacking in the Black community. And that's not just an opinion, it's more like a fact. And we can see that across the hoods, across the suburbs. So like if we're talking about suburbs, we lived in the hood for a good chunk of my life, but we had to moved to the suburbs when my mom got Section 8. And Section 8 is another great illusion. So you're living in a nice area and you get the government to pay half of your rent on a monthly basis. But at the end of the day, how much money do you have in your savings? How much wealth are you accumulating as an individual in America? And ultimately, even out of the folks that are Black that are on Section 8, they even have negative wealth. And that's because, again, they don't have more assets than they have debt. And that's the reality that we're dealing with since slavery. You know what I'm saying?
And if you have too much money, then the Section 8 you got to pay.
Yeah, it goes away. Yeah,
Section 8. And then I was listening to a report of 4 people who are eligible for Section 8. Only one of them actually ever get it. You know what I'm saying? So the line is like super long.
It is.
You know what I mean?
They apply, but they don't get it. They just
right. Yeah, only one out of 4 people who are eligible for Section 8 who apply actually get Section 8. You know what I'm saying? But it's an income. And then on top of that, there's a lot of people who don't accept Section 8. You know what I mean? And so you could have a Section 8 voucher and, you know what I'm saying, try to get it, somebody would take, to take it, you know what I'm saying? And they, if you can't find it, you only have a certain time frame that you could have that voucher and not actually use that voucher. If you can't find anybody that's going to, you know what I'm saying, rent to you, with the Section 8 voucher, you know what I'm saying, then you've lost that opportunity and it's going to just cycle to the next person.
So two things I want to throw in there. One, back to Ernest's point, let me give this a framework that a lot of my other contemporaries can also understand. You go to school and you don't get a full ride, but you know that college is the thing you're supposed to do. You want to have a life. You take out the loans, you do the hard work, you come out with sterling A's, everything, and you get a good job. But that good job only gets you about 50 grand, but your school costs so much that your freaking student loans you got to pay on are a burden. This is a very common condition where the loans are pretty massive in terms of the payment that you take on. And then when you start doing your ins and outs for your monthly asset, you're just up to here. And that is the result of, listen, what happened there was that you were ADOS. Nobody gave you any influx of money to offset the cost of school. Then you had to take out the loan to make sure you got through school because you were determined, and that determination is the right thing to have, but they cut away your ability to actually pay for it. The cost of school is high because somebody can pay for it, which isn't you. And then you made it out and you got a decent job because somebody took care to actually realize you were an individual. But even if you're getting paid the same as your white colleague, you have more in debt than your white colleague to pay off. And then you're paying it off longer. If not, you have a much, much higher bill than them. And so your debt to income ratio in that 1 month to throw you off the cliff if anything goes south. And so they don't end up with the savings, like you said. I just want to mention.
And the folks that go to school, but they can't finish because that money, that financial aid only going to go so far. If your parents can't qualify for a Parent Plus loan, shit, you're stuck. You got to get your own loans in your own name and figure it out. But if you don't even have the money for that, you're out of school. The school's going to tell you. And that's HBCUs on top. So it's like Black colleges don't really give a shit about what your wealth level is. If you ain't got the money, you're not in school. That's just,
Which is kind of makes you think about Black banks, though, because Black banks, the idea behind Black banks when we started them was that they would loan money to us because no one else would. And HBCUs would let us get an education when no one else would. But nobody dealt with the fact that we didn't have the money to keep the Black bank open. We didn't have the money to keep the HBCU well put together. And we don't have the money to stay in the HBCU, and the Black banks failed.
Yep.
Yeah, exactly.
Serious
man.
condition.
No,
No,
it's like a cycle, dude. You know, it's like a hamster running on a hamster wheel, man. You know what I mean?
Back to black faces in high places. Where were the black politicians that railed against them raising the college costs? Where were the black politicians?
They see that what happened to them, and if you go back to that article, going back to that, the article even talks about like what ended over time. I didn't have a lot of time to dwell in it, but they're saying what ended up happening is that once all the resources were being taken out of the black cities, right? You know what I mean? Because how you got black mayors is that you had a higher black population, and this is the way it goes. You get higher black population, white people leave, they take all the assets with them. You know what I'm saying? Then in turn, crime rate goes up. You know what I mean? Layoffs were happening in the 70s, 80s, 90s. We had the crack era. So what ended up happening was, everyone was asking, doubling down on police state. You know what I'm saying? Police, you had the black mayors being more conservative and, talking down to the black people or whatever. You know what I mean? Then they were trying to address the issue or saying, hey, we need funds, or, you know what I'm saying? Or we need resources and so on and so forth, or what have you. And then they were more wedded to the Democratic, party, because that's how they're getting elected, right? Because you know what I'm saying, black people can't fund a damn major campaign by themselves, right? So you have to depend on the donors, the apparatus. That's what a political party is all about. If everyone knows, a political party's purpose is to get their candidates elected, so they fund money to them, so on and so forth. So that puts them into the status quo. They can't be revolutionary, they can't be radical, they can't be transformational, because that's not what the donors want, because the donor class are part of the rich class. You know what I'm saying? They're all the same.
That's why calls for a black political party they won't be undergirded well, because you can't even get everybody to pay attention to black politics to begin with, let alone do we have the money to actually fight against a democratic apparatus.
And like I said, then the funding. Where are you gonna get the funding? You know what I'm saying? That's the whole thing.
But see, this is what I was saying.
It's not that we don't. It's not. So here, go ahead.
Well, the thing about it is you got to understand, like, what's the point of you? What's the point of what you're doing? Because so many people, like when you look at these politicians, they might start off with good intentions. Even like you look at AOC, who like she ran on this progressive policy, the Democratic Socialists of America supported her or whatever. But you see her get in office and she just supports Nancy Pelosi or whatever the Democrat establishment talking point is. She don't even take money from them donors, and she's still supporting them policies. So it's like, how can we, as a group of people, black people, working people, whatever, how can we get something done when the people who get in office, either they're easily persuaded to pack away whatever their ambitions change for revolutionary action or whatever, or they really never had a real investment in the communities they claim to be representing, and they just wanted to sell out to the highest bidder whenever they got their first opportunity. You know what I'm saying? So like, that's what we have to understand. We have to gain some political maturity and decide that we, as a group, we're going to try to be more critical about who we select for these offices. And this takes work. It does take a lot of work. But like I'm saying, if you got the option between a black person who's going to do you like George Bush and George Bush, what's the difference? What's the benefit? You do better to try to mobilize a group of people to work against the establishment in general than you would try to pick one over the other. Because like one of the things, it's an article, and I don't have it, but it's an article where they talked about like the intelligence community and the quote unquote deep state were talking about that they needed Obama to win the election because he put a pleasant face on imperialism. So like everybody went to sleep, everybody was cool. Like you remember the old Boondocks, like when who was Huey? Not Huey. Riley was saying, "My president is black, my Lambo's blue," and the whole Jeezy song that he was talking. Yeah. It was the Candy episode. He was like, "Yeah, nigga, my president is black," and basically like people really thought like Obama gonna be black. I could just do whatever I want to do. Obama's in office, and I could do whatever I want to do. He gonna take care of me. One, that's not how it works. The president doesn't have that type of power. But two, like, what about this man said to you that he was invested in your community? What about this man said he was invested in collective uplift of either black people or minorities or working people or whatever. What made you think he had anything with your community? Right. We got to get above that. You know what I'm saying? We got to get above that.
So one thing. So before I want Stedman to take I want you to take a few minutes to talk about bootstrapperism and capitalism. You know, the myth of black capitalism, just for a few minutes. But I think I just want to show something here. I got a chart here. Ernest shared with us. I'm just going to throw that up real quick, and then we're going to hop to Stedman and wrap it up because we're over our time out here on these streets. But let's see if I can get this to pop up, sir. You want to talk to this? What's going on with this profile of a household with negative wealth?
Yep. So basically, New York Federal Reserve basically they basically released data, and in this article here, they basically gave some good visuals that I want to show to kind of explain how we need to think about negative wealth. And so if you scroll down, right now it says average annual income, for those with positive wealth is at 86,000, and those with negative wealth is at around 40,000. So that would show you that even after college, if you're not going to school for the right thing and you're not making above, $50,000 to $60,000, you're already in what they would consider the negative wealth bracket, and that's because what the average is. And so, out of
86,000, bro.
So look though,
so look, the truth, $15 an hour that still ain't gonna be shit.
Exactly.
So I'm glad you brought this up, bro.
So look,
talking about that.
So look, on top of that, 80 at a positive wealth, 75% of the population owns a home. But when negative wealth and you're at 39,000, only 19% owns a home. So you're thinking this is with all ethnicity groups. So imagine how despair this is for black people, specifically ADOS. Now, if we scroll down like a little bit, even just scroll up a little bit more, Darvell. I skipped the other one, which says underwater, percentage of homeowners underwater. So looking at positive wealth, right? 4% are underwater on mortgage, which means they just behind on bills, just 4%. 36% of those with negative wealth is behind on bills. But again, this is with all ethnicity groups. Imagine how severe this is for ADOS. If you scroll down now, we can look at the head of household data. There's just a few other visualizations. So like when they look at postgraduate, even college, all of these, the representation looks pretty much.
Both of them got college degrees. Look, both got college degrees. Both got postgraduate degrees at the same percentages. Only a few.
Now, for those with negative wealth, it does have female like at 69%.
That's the black community, right?
Yeah, exactly. So I would say that's an overrepresentation of, like you said, Gerard. Most of our males go to jail. Right. And you got the women leading the household, so it's a single household. And that's the 69% that's making about $39,000 every year in America. So if we scrolling down a little bit more, I think it was like a few other ones. So we got single minority group, of course. So like they're saying out of all minorities, that 24% that have those who have negative wealth, 24%
are minority.
I guess make up, our minority. Yep. Yeah. So again, that's even skewed because they have all of these other minority groups included inside of that.
Right. They need to make a chart just like this for ADOS versus everybody. ADOS versus everybody. And we'll find a whole bunch of chaos going down.
So looking at the haves versus have-nots, right?
All right.
So those with what's the composition of assets and debts, for the poorest, 1/3. So we're looking at 1/3 of those with negative wealth. And this is the statistics of that. So basically, out of those who have negative wealth, the poorest 1/3, only 20% has. I guess they don't even have this whole house.
Yeah, I know this is kind of confusing.
Yeah, this one's a confusing piece. Scroll down just a little. 20%
have
homes,
home assets, and 45% have a car as they most expensive asset. Whereas you look at that's the exact opposite with the
so assets and debts. So if we're looking at the bottom one right there, like
Cadillacs,
out of those with the good wealth, only 6% have student loans or student debt.
What?
And then only 30%, have mortgage debt.
And the reason why is just like Darvell was saying, bro, because their families they can just pay it. You know what I'm saying? Nobody taking no damn loan. You know what I'm saying? Nobody, either one or two things happen. Either A, they paid their college forward back like 20-something years. So by the time they 20, they already paid them 527s, all them different, you know what I'm saying, prepaid college. They got that. And I know I was in Florida, they had that. Or you can like literally invest, you know what I'm saying? You got extra money to invest like $500, $600 a month. You know what I'm saying? So by the time your college, age student gets 18, whatever, you know what I mean? You got like, 200, 300, whatever, 400,000, if not more. Because that's almost like a 401k if you invest in that much, you know what I'm saying, over 20 years. But who has that? You know what I'm saying? When you just regular working people, who has 500 to 600 just to religiously monthly to spend on your kid going to college? You know what I'm saying? Our mama started and she you know what I'm saying? She took the money out. That's what I knew.
That money that's going into a college savings plan, that's the money. Listen, this is how it works over generation over generation. Right. That's the money that we're using to pay off the student loan or the house that we got no down payment assistance for. So what happens is we are always trying to play catch up where they had a head start. So now they can put money into a slush fund just for the child's education.
Now, so look, out of that, so this one now I just got it to make sense, but they're saying 1/3 has household wealth greater than zero. You see it right underneath halves. It says household wealth greater than zero. Right. Now look at the have-nots. Their household wealth is between negative 47,000 to 520,000. What the? Now I know ADOS ain't got that much debt because the government ain't gonna let us get away with it. But
that's house card, dog. That's house card.
It's like having a line of credit, man. You got a whole line of credit over here. You got a whole business running off of this debt. You started a bakery.
Yeah.
Or you got people who do that. Or you know what I'm saying? So you know what I'm saying? Either one or two things, right? Either they taking out money for the house and the car. Or, the few of us that choose to, venture out, you know what I'm saying? They're taking our money for their business. You know what I'm saying? One of the two ways that they, you know what I'm saying? But at the end of the day, you got to take our money. You don't have a family member that can, you know what I mean? You don't have for instance, Amazon, his daddy gave him $300,000 to start freaking Amazon in his garage, quote unquote. I forgot what Mark Zuckerberg daddy was able to.
So let me hit you with this one. This is a square it up because there's gonna be some folks running around talking about, hey, but I know this person, they was black inside of y'all and yada dee. Listen, go back about 3 years ago. There's a really well-known bake shop in Detroit, Good Cakes and Bakes, right? That was they got organic, all these great, baked goods. We had an event with Black Young Professionals a couple years ago where we interviewed Black entrepreneurs, including April from the bakery, as her bakery. And one of the things that came out is that she got I think at least 50 grand from her family to start that place. Mm-hmm. But that's what we call an outlier. I need people to remember that because what happened is they hear that. And you know what happened though? I'll give credit. Somebody in the audience peeped that right away and started pressing about it. They was like, well, that don't even make any sense. Where did that come from? That's not typical ADOS life. That was before I even knew about the movement. That was before BLM was even hot this. So it's like there are outliers, but don't take that to be the indication that the collective has risen. Because what happens is the baby boomers give you that type of money because they got it in the corner.
Mm-hmm.
Let me shut it down.
So and I would say just to segue into what we're going to talk about next, keep in mind that even though this is as disparate, even though this is a disparity, for us, we still got to get it out the mud. So in some form or fashion, we still got to trap, but we can't out-trap being black because as we can see based on these statistics, this is going to take a lot. Honestly, you have to become a black celebrity, make $1 million plus a year in order for you not to have to, personally, you and your family not to have to deal with these statistics in some way, shape, or form. So, if we're going to segue into our next segment, which is to address bootstrapperism, I do believe, and I'm going to say this before you jump into it, Stem, I do believe, some form of bootstrapperism is needed for the black community, but at the same time, there is an understanding of what that word means that's needed for our people.
Please explain it, Stedman, before I jump in here and I get upset, dog. Because I'm like, because I got too many people running around doing this right now.
So originally the term, like the whole thing, lift yourself up by your bootstraps, that was like used in jest because that's impossible to do. Like, you can't pick yourself up, let alone buy your shoes. And so it's supposed to be like indicative of like an impossible task, an impossible piece of advice. And like, it's become a term where you expect people to do something without help. And so that's just like, it shows how insane we are as a nation or as a group of people, because we allow these types of stupid ways of thinking to be pervasive in our everyday speech, and we take it to heart. And it's not possible. It's not physically possible. It's never been possible. It's never been done. So I want to talk about this book here called The Myth of Black Capitalism. It's real hard to find. I found this at King's Books. It's a real bookstore here in Detroit. And I looked online. I've seen it for like $200 a copy. But the book really breaks down like how black capitalism doesn't exist. The whole concept is faulty. I mean, just listening to what we're talking about. The black community is really built on a house of cards. We don't have any foundation. We don't have any capital infusions from anybody coming anywhere, government, family, otherwise. Every time that there is some way for black people to use non-legal means as a springboard to create legal wealth, they changed the law, because like it wasn't legal. It was money laundering wasn't illegal until like 85 or 86. But what happened? The crack boom. You saw a lot more black people being able to take crack money, illegal money, and turn that, and so they made that illegal, and so it's just what the book breaks down is over the course of black life. In America, every chance that there has never been for some type of capital.
Yep, breaking out a little bit, Steb.
Steb, you frozen, bro.
Yep.
Oh no,
But I think what Steb
you might have some black professionals who have wealth.
Steb, we missed it, man. You gotta have to.
You said black infusion. You were at that part.
Yeah, you froze up on us.
Say it again. Oh, okay, my bad.
Listen.
But you have some black professionals. You have some black professionals, some blacks with money, primarily preachers, and you might have black dentists, black doctors. And what they'll do is they'll steer money to their capitalist ventures, right? So they'll set up organizations that help the few black elite that exist, who are a buffer between everyday black people and the white people with money. And they try to use themselves as some type of target for regular black people to aspire to. And the majority of us can't reach those goals, right? You look at the NBA. You look at LeBron James, because he's like the biggest black celebrity we kind of have as far as athlete. And none of the four of us can do what he's doing physically. None of us can do what he's doing. So that automatically takes us out of the actual running to kind of have any of his wealth or what it boils down to. You put people up who really are unicorns. They're unicorns. People who have slipped through the cracks, who have gotten some type of line that we're not aware of, or that they're not, making a big deal out of. And then they go on and say, well, you just got to do this. But you didn't do that. But like we talked about earlier with the monopoly situation, people don't see the help they get. They just see the outcome. So, my father, you hear people say, my people immigrated here and whatever. I'm a third generation or whatever. And my people came from nothing and they were able. Well, yeah, but you know why? Because your family wasn't locked out of the situation at a constitutional level, right? Your people were able to come over here and to whatever degree participate in the American experiment. And my people haven't been, and a lot of people's haven't been. And so That's what we have to understand. Check out this book. I don't want to really go over too much because we're really over already. But if you can find this PDF, it's The Myth of Black Capitalism by Earl O'Farrill. And I mean, it's eye-opening because all the stuff that you see now, it's like it's nothing new. And this, when he wrote this book was written in 1973. He talks about how the primary black businesses were like tailors, grocery stores, barbershops, and I forget the fourth thing. Like insurance agents. And like primarily now, blacks don't really do grocery stores anymore. That's not the option. But we still do insurance. We still try to do some type of banking thing. And then we still doing like barbershops. Everybody want to get a barbershop. And it's like without trying to do anything to consolidate our resources as a group.
Whoa, $796.
Hey, got a bag on it.
I just love it. I got it for like $15, dude. I found it for like $15 at King's Books, man. I mean, if you can find a PDF or something, like it's really a good read. And I know, like, but that's how it is. They put stuff in books and it's out of reach. You know what I'm saying? The information is out of reach.
They say, right? You know what they say?
Yeah.
You want to keep something from a Negro, put it in a book.
Right.
That's raise the price.
$6 for it.
It's a
5-star
book.
I mean, but to your point, to your point, Gerard, it's like what can I physically get from this book is how people think, and really, it's a lot that you can get.
A lot you can get from it. The color of money. Also, actually, I think she uses some of the data. The author from The Color of Money actually uses some of the data from or at least mentions that book. I know she mentioned because it was that study and it was another study that was done in the 40s as well by another person that was archiving black businesses or what have you. And even then, it was this whole idea that during segregation we had barbershops, we had this and blah 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 and this and that, and you know what I mean. And reality it's like no, it wasn't it was a segregated economy. Yes, we did have some stakes and ownership, but it wasn't no freaking great thing. Like everyone talks about the bottoming out of Black Bottom and Paradise Valley, and bruh, it wasn't what you thought it was. I'm telling you. I'm telling you. Yes, there was a black people that owned some stuff and so on and so forth, man. But Black Bottom was a slum. You know what I mean?
You mean Black Bottom, Detroit?
Yeah, Sorry. Black Bottom was a slum, dude. At the end of the day.
We glorifying it's over glorified. It's
definitely was over glorified.
Even like you're saying, it was some black ownership. But with eminent domain, right, a lot of those places weren't owned by black people. So when they put 375 there, you give the whoever owns that property, you give them fair market value for that property. You bulldoze it and you put a freeway there. But the black people who were renting that space out, who were renting that home, who were renting that space for their business, they didn't get any money from it. So now you asked out again.
You know what I'm saying? Like same. Go ahead, man. I'm sorry.
Well, no, that was the same. It's the same thing happening now. You asked out again. You don't have any ability.
It happened to downtown and midtown. All the black businesses that were downtown and midtown before it became like what it is today. When the property values went up, the rents went up. They forced them to move out of the city. You know what I'm saying? Or to other parts of the city. They couldn't, you know what I'm saying? Businesses that have been around for like, multiple, double-digit years in those areas couldn't afford it anymore. You know what I mean? Because, like I said, that on the surface it looked like, that's his shop. He walk into it every day. No, he's renting that. He don't own that building 9 times out of 10.
Right.
You know what I'm saying? 9 times out of 10. And there's another thing too. You speaking to about like the whatchamacallit about like black people, for us to make money, you know what I'm saying, in large amounts, we got to have sweat equity. That means you're a dancer, you're an entertainer, you got to be sweating to get that type of money. You know what I'm saying?
Unfortunately,
I heard about say that one time, but yeah. But anyways, I see we got something for my good brother Darvell about to educate us on it.
Well, I'm not going to play this one here. I just wanted you mentioned, what happened in Midtown, and it reminded me of this really good short film from Cincinnati called Good White People. It's a really interesting video that plays out with a very short narrative, an explicit showcase of what it looks like when white folks show up into an area that they formerly abandoned, because Cincinnati was a German type of settlement. They formerly abandoned it. They left the black people in this area called Over the Rhine. Over the Rhine was a place where back when I was in school in Cincinnati, you drive through Over the Rhine, there was more people in the street than there were cars in the street, because it was just the black neighborhood. It was just rich with the culture and the crime that you would expect. But now it is essentially what we will think of as a midtown on steroids, because it's still north of downtown, but it's got all these businesses crammed packed into it, and it's like a walkable space. And so it's like the place to go and kick it and hang out in Cincinnati, but now it's overwhelmingly white. And the folks who were living there originally that looked like you and I, they got pushed out. So Good White People is a great little narrative that shows what it looked like in Cincinnati. I really encourage people to take a few seconds and watch it. It's not very long. It's a really good watch.
Like they said back in the day when they were bulldozing and going through all of the creating them freeways, because most of the freeways that we know of today, it was the same thing happened in Florida. Central Tampa was a black owned. They put through up I-4 and 275 through there. I'm sorry, 275, I-75 here. It happened all throughout the country when they were putting up the freeways. And they were calling it urban renewal. And even then, people was like, "Oh yeah, urban renewal, Negro removal." You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Right. They start talking about walkable cities and bike paths and so on and so forth. You know, some white people coming. You know what I'm saying?
Yep.
Now rent about to go up, and they don't got it. They don't have to say we don't want niggas living here no more. It's like, we just make the rent like $1,300, $1,400, $1,500. We know you can't afford it. The average one of y'all can't afford it. And
shoot, and what happens is right there, to Ernest's point, even when we can't afford it, it becomes this divisive thought of, well, do I want to live the life and pay it and not be able to make savings? Or do I realize that I can't even live in the area that's supposedly supposed to be for me because they're charging more than they know black people can afford?
Mm-hmm.
Anyway, I think we got to wrap this up, guys. We've been back real hard.
It's a comment. A user commented. They said they're sick of hearing about the black buying power myth.
Oh yeah, being $1 trillion.
It's real. It's real.
Consumer goods.
Yeah, exactly. But look how big an economy though is. You know what I'm saying? Like the buying power. Yeah, but we're buying that's just what it costs to live in America. You know what I mean? Not even that's the straight buy in America. So if that's what it costs to buy in America, how much is it to actually really own America? What type of buying power is that?
Huh?
So
the whole GDP of America is like $20 trillion. So let's say black people do have $1 trillion of buying power. What are you going to get? You got a 20th of the total. I mean, but the thing about it, the whole buying power narrative, that was created by the Federal Reserve back in the day as a measure of worker stability, so that they could see if people was going to try to form unions or strike or do any kind of mass worker uprising. But that's it. The buying power thing doesn't actually translate to anything as far as an indicator of real quality of life or power that comes from financial power stability. It's another one of those, just like picking yourself up by your bootstraps, one of those nonsensical measures or
Hey, the buying power thing kills me too, because people, especially on Facebook, run around talking about, well, if we just took this $1 trillion in buying power and put it into black banks, and then you got to realize that's people. Listen, these, oh my God, or spending with black, stores. I'm not gonna get into it. I can't.
We can cover it in future shows. So I would say to give our wrapping up points, I could go first. To all of our viewers out there, I just want to say thank you guys for watching, and at the same time to wrap up some key points in what I covered and what the whole group covered today is let's try to make sure going forward in 2020 or to end out the rest of this year and going forward into 2021 that we try to have that black civic engagement that we need to have, and at the same time a lot of us, we are in a bad position, or we have been dealt bad cards. But the only way we could get out of that is by educating ourselves politically and at the same time financially making the right decisions for our families or for our children's future. So that's just one thing I wanted to say. And then the other thing I wanted to say was that I know you guys had the color of wealth, a color of money up on the screen, the book. And just to give like the first paragraph of the book, is in the introduction, it says, all too often when there is mass unemployment in the Black community, it is referred to as a social problem. And when there is mass unemployment in the white community, it is referred to as depression, said Martin Luther King in 1968. But there is no basic difference. The fact that the Negro faces a little depression all over the U.S. is consistent. Today, across every socioeconomic level, Blacks have significantly less wealth than whites. Over a third of Black families have either negative wealth or no assets at all. And this was in 1968. So again, if we look at what the 70s and the crack epidemic and mass incarceration has done to our people, the statistics are worse than that. So the only way we can combat that is by getting serious and getting ready to do this work, which is having civic engagement and at the same time holding these politicians in high places accountable. So that's all I had, guys.
Gerard?
Hey, man, I ended out like I always do, man. We have no permanent friends. We have no permanent enemies, only permanent interest. And, man, and permanent interest in this particular case is, getting civically engaged, getting politically engaged, and really fighting for reparations. I mean, that's like the major tent pole in the tent is reparations. And, that's a much longer fight, but it's a fight that has to be had, and it can't be something that we obscure or we try to, say is just impossible to have. Because guess what? At one point in time, it was impossible to think that Black people could actually be free in this country. We were property. That was considered impossible. It was impossible. It was impossible to think that a Black person could be living in the same area, go to the same schools as a white person. That was considered impossible, and no, white people would never allow that to happen. And yes, they did indeed fight all of those things. They had a war over it, and there was a lot of fighting going on about desegregation all throughout the country, as we see those black and white videos. When you grow up, watching Eyes on the Prize, as I did growing up. Right, we saw that was physical confrontation over that, and I wouldn't be surprised in this matter with reparations. It would have to be also the same, but it's just as pivotal because that's the only way in a society that's based on money, based on capital and money, to succeed, for us to actually move forward. Because we're so behind the curve. You know what I'm saying? So behind. Us trying to do this on our own. Financially, it's not going to work. So again, no permanent friends, no permanent enemies, only permanent interests.
Stedman, what you got for the people as we will close it out? Stedman has a bit of for the people.
Try to get that PDF because the book is too expensive to buy. I mean, I said that, but like last night it was like $270. Those $1,000. That's like a course. You know what I'm saying? It's like a 4-credit hour course in a community college shit.
Stedman got an asset in there.
Right. I might be
PDF. You know what I mean?
Maybe that's the move. All right. Well, I think I doubled down.
But yeah, man, you just got to try to, try to get the information, try to do your research, man.
And to close it out, I will say, I'm just going to continue to push and warn people. Don't let these intellectually lazy, politically unsavvy, imagination lacking individuals, running around here today trying to push Black capitalism, dissuade you from being politically engaged. Politically engaged individuals are the only ones who truly start to see why everything else isn't working, because it's been the distribution of the wealth in this country and the divvying of resources that are done through politics that has excluded us from every marketable element that we can see in our life, and has resulted in us being at the bottom of every metric you can point to in this country. It has nothing to do with anything else, and racism is used to undergird those policies. So until we deal with the policies, you're going to be dealing with being black. So thank you, everybody, for calling in or tuning in today to the Freedman's Collective. We out.
Peace.
Peace.